Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bikinis After Babies. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, I am one of your hosts, Mandy Rashawn, here with your other host, IFBB Pro, Jillian Hughes.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can already see our beautiful guest that we have today, but we are so excited to welcome Celeste Rains-Turke. And many of our listeners will know this fabulous woman and recognize her voice, who is the host and founder of Confessions of a Bikini Pro Podcast, a weekly podcast where she shines light on female athletes and their struggles and strategies for success. Celeste has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's of science in clinical mental health counseling and is the founder of Build More Than Just a Body, where she guides competitors in their journey to make peace with food, their body, and their goals. Celeste is also a public speaker and advocate of mental health in the fitness industry and the best-selling author of the personal development book, Believe Your Way to Badass. Celeste herself has been competing in bodybuilding for almost 10 years, and with her training and education, she has become an industry-leading expert in the area of food relationships, body image, post-show struggles, and mental health in the fitness industry. We are so excited to talk to Celeste today about her journey and her passions. Welcome to Bikinis After Babies, Celeste Rains-Turke.
Welcome.
Thank you. That was like the best intro I've heard. I am in shock right now. I'm like, okay, save that for me for later. I'm gonna put that on every bio request. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, you have had quite the career, and there's so much that we want to talk to you about today. And I'm just really thrilled to have you here and have your experience for our listeners.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here too. I think what you guys are doing with this podcast is awesome, especially as someone who wants to be a mom one day. Just knowing the process, seeing that success is possible, giving other moms or aspiring moms a platform to learn from and have hope in as well. Because I have so many clients who tell me like they're worried that if they give up, they're going to have to give up competing to become a mom. Yeah. Or they're going to lose themselves, or they worry about their body image and how it's going to change with pregnancy and what kind of influence they're going to have. Like, it's a very common thing. So to have this resource to be able to provide is so amazing. So I'm really glad you guys are doing this.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, you've definitely inspired us for sure. We're both listeners of your podcast, and you've brought so many amazing topics to light that maybe competitors just feel like they're alone in their journey, and it's just so nice to have the stories to be able to identify with and be able to find strategies to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we generally like to get started in finding out how it is that you got started on your fitness journey and your journey competing.
Yeah, so I started in 2015. That was my first show. And I was in this mode of I had quit volleyball. I was starting a business as an online trainer. I was 18 years old, and I had graduated high school early, and I was like, you know what? I really want to see how far I can push myself. I want to see what I can do. It was that athlete in me that still wanted to do it. I think part of me felt like it would probably be good for being a trainer as well. I gain even more perspective. But I would say a lot of it kind of more so acted as a Band-Aid to disordered eating and body image issues more than anything else. But I did that first show in 2015, became the jaded competitor post-show. I was like, bodybuilding ruins everything, blah, blah, blah. Well, then I took personal responsibility, worked on myself, did a lot of healing work, switched my degree from dietetics to psychology because I found my passion was not in telling people what to eat, but understanding why people eat and how to support them through those processes of behavior change too. And then that evolved with my competing journey. I decided, you know what, I want to show. At the time, I did not know I would end up doing the work that I do now. But I was like, I want to show that you can compete and remain mentally healthy. So I decided I'm going to compete again. It's going to be for a different reason. Met Mandy. This is a 2017 competition journey started. Fell back in love with competing. I was like, okay, I really love this now. This is what I want to do. And at the time, I had always had the Build More Than Just a Body mission, even as a personal trainer. But then I realized, oh my gosh, it's for bodybuilders. That came apparent to me when I had started Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast in 2018. And I was like, oh, we all struggle with this. And then I was like, I can help people through this. So that's when my studies really were more focused on elite athletes or aesthetic-based athletes or body weight-based athletes, as well as overall personal development through food relationship, through body image, and so on. And my business, I got 2 clients in my first offer. I was like, it's going to be successful. I got a lot of I got a lot of lash, like, oh, it's not going to be, coaches won't want to support you, whatever. But I still loved competing. I wanted to give competitors what I had found, which was freedom with food without the sacrifice of my competition goals, and peace with my body without the sacrifice of, again, the competition goals and those ups and downs we can experience, being completely rid of them and instead feeling like that transition is quite easy and actually enjoyable. And you're not just always looking forward to prep or the next prep. And so then I started the clinical mental health counseling journey, and all of this coincided with my competition prep journey. I actually finished my degree for clinical mental health counseling while I was in my most recent show prep, which was 2022. And I have never done a prep, not being in school. So this will be, I'm just started a prep and I'm not in school, and I'm like, this is different. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
Wow,
That's incredible.
So neat.
Thank you.
Because it is a very like specified niche, and I'm sure there were people telling you like you need to be more broad, but I think it's so awesome that you married those two like passions together. So
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think you did it beautifully. I can imagine when you started, because when I met you in 2017, we were having a blast backstage in Las Vegas. That was just,
It was so fun.
That show was fun. The team was fun. It was a great time. And I remember you had I think you had just came out with your book. It was like around that time, or you had written your book already.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I remember thinking, I'm like, gosh, you have so much fire and ambition and passion, and you're so young. And I'm like, oh, this will be so cool to see what you do in this sport. And that was in 2017.
Wow.
And like, it's like, now look at you. So it's just incredible to hear how much you've like helped so many people. And I can imagine the negativity you probably got when you started this. Like, just to think like coaches maybe being kind of brass about it, being like, oh, girls aren't going to want to talk about that. They're not going to want to do that. When in reality, it's something everybody struggles with in this sport. Like everybody, somehow, some way, small or big, like struggles with it. So like,
Absolutely.
I find like your whole journey fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually really grateful for the amount of support I ended up getting and growing into over the years. The coaches who really recognize that your mental health has a direct impact on your success in competing really took well to it. I think other coaches identified it as a need that they needed to try to satisfy themselves too, which is, I'm just glad there's more mental health being talked about in the industry. So that's a win as well. And I think it's progressed over the years too. And I love to see it, because I still to this day have clients who hire me and they're like, I didn't know that I'm not the only one struggling with this until I went on your website. And I'm like, it is a true struggle, but I think what happens in our industry specifically is, as competitors, we are trying to be at the top. There are more losers than winners, right? There's one winner, sometimes two, when it comes to getting your pro card, but there's a lot more losers. So your likelihood of getting picked is actually lower than maybe we want to believe. And because of that, we have this mentality of being set apart from other people, this 1%er mentality. You got to be in the top 1%. So you get hyper focused, and anything that forms or poses a threat to that identity feels like it should be swept under the rug, ignored, avoided. So then you don't want to face the truth, which is this thing that I'm like pretending isn't a big deal is actually the exact thing that's sabotaging me from the success. So I don't blame that athlete mentality at all, or that competitive mentality of I don't want to get support with something that's very vulnerable to admit is hard when I also identify as a high achieving athlete.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it like that. That's incredible.
Just sort of like the,
I really haven't.
Oh, well, pros don't struggle, and like Olympians don't struggle. Like I'll just figure it out. And there's like so much shame around that. And so when you started the podcast, was that something that was very surprising for you, as like to interview these women and to realize all of the struggles that they were having, just like regular normal people did?
Yes, actually, it really was, because the idea to start the podcast came to me when I was running on the treadmill in my garage, and like there were these Oreos on the shelf, and I was like, I wonder if these pros think about these Oreos. Like, I don't know how they do it. And then I was like, well, what do they struggle with? And I remember like pulling up Instagram feeds, and at the time, Instagram and marketing in general wasn't as much of a use of vulnerability for promotion. It was more so a use of perfection for promotion. So you didn't see a lot of people's life behind the scenes. It was just, here's what I eat, here's what I do. So to actually start to learn about these women, there were many times, even to this day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would have never known that, or I would have never understood, because it's not shared or commonly discussed as a feed post. I mean, we don't all want to share our most vulnerable things.
Yeah.
So yeah, to hear a pro tell me that they struggle, I'm like, so I'm beating myself up as an amateur. This person's an actual professional athlete, and they have these struggles, some of which were more challenging or posing more of a challenge and inhibiting on their life more than my own challenges were. So it really opened up my mind to like, oh, this is a bigger deal than we know about.
Yeah.
Do you think that was like the most surprising thing, like to learn that, like, and is that why you started the podcast, or was it sort of just out of like, I would love to hear some like helpful tips and strategies from, these athletes, and then the side effect is like, wow, now I see this big need for something in our industry that there's nothing there like this.
Yeah, selfishly, there was a success leaves clues desire. I'm like, well, if I want to be them, I'm going to see what they're doing, and I'm going to learn from that success. And then I remember very first episode, a teammate of mine at the time, she was like, Tamara, by the way, she was like, oh, these are all these different things. And I was like, and we ended up talking for like an hour plus after the recording. And I'm like, my mind was being blown. And I was like, why are we not talking about these things? So it was surprising, and what it taught me, though, was when you become a champion, the target on your back gets bigger, not smaller. It gets bigger. So when you think, oh, if I can just achieve this goal, then I'll feel better. Then I won't struggle with these things. But that association doesn't really make sense, because what you're doing every day to get there will eventually continue to manifest or grow or support how you've gotten there will be supported by what you continue to do to stay there. So I realized, like, champions, the target on their back actually gets bigger. That means more pressure. It means having to participate in things that maybe they didn't expect to. Interviews, social media, modeling, YouTube promotion videos, like all these things that come with being a very successful professional athlete. Now you see why some people maybe self-sabotage against getting there. Or I started to see why that put a lot of pressure on them. So it was very surprising, Jillian, because I was like, oh, I thought like everything was so great for these people, but it turns out it's actually, there are challenges that come with this growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like anyone who's listening, to the podcast and hears the struggles, I think that can be very comforting. And you say this all the time, which I think is so wonderful, that you don't have to stop competing to heal your relationship with food. And just to share like a personal experience, I've had that said to me a couple of times. And I opened up on your podcast about struggles in the past, in like childhood, and then, entering into bodybuilding. Of course, naturally, someone who has a history of eating disorder is like very, attracted to the idea of, having that control and building that body and whatnot. And so it followed me a lot through my early days in competing. And I definitely had, several people say, well, the two things cannot exist. So how is that something that you've been able to sort of like open up people's eyes to say like, no, there is a way to be able to do this and do this in a healthy way with a healthy mindset? Because I do think that there's people who don't believe that the two can exist together.
Yeah, well, I think the easy thing to say is that they can't coexist. The easiest thing to say is give up competing and you'll heal your relationship with food. And what that does is it places all the blame on competing. But what it fails to do is identify the healthy habits and behaviors that come with competing. And then you see the tailspin of people who are like, well, I can't compete. So then they let go of the entire lifestyle. They demonize the entire lifestyle and they fall into the opposite extreme. it's very disappointing from a mental health perspective too, because if our whole goal is to support people in getting through cognitive distortions, and then our message is to beat all or nothing thinking with something so extreme as to give something up completely. This is not alcohol. This is not drugs, okay? This is a sport. And with that, there are many ways to achieve the end goal. What the problem is people oftentimes associate getting to this end goal looks like or has to look like this. Therefore, if it doesn't, I'm a failure. At one point, it was, if you're not following a bro diet, you're going to fail. And then it was, well, if you're not following macros, then you're probably not going to have as much longevity. And then it was, oh, well, if you're not taking care of your gut health. So all of this to say, to meet an extreme problem of binge eating, let's say, or overly restricting or compensatory behaviors with, well, just stop competing. It completely erases the need for personal responsibility. What needs to change in your process to make this something that you can do, not just do both, but actually enjoy both? And when you close your eyes and you think about the version of you that gets to that end result, what do you want to look back on and see yourself having gone through and done and challenged yourself with that would actually be fulfilling? And a lot of times, people are like, well, I thought I was supposed to do it this way. Well, you really don't have to. So that's why I know it's possible. One, I've done it, and I've helped so many people do it too. But also because there's a million ways to approach competing. Granted, if you're the type of person who wants to have Taco Tuesday every week in your prep might be a little bit longer than the person who doesn't need Taco Tuesday every week in their prep, or maybe can macro it in and it looks different. Of course. So we have to accept that what we desire in our process will impact maybe length of time or the outcome, but it's about the longevity and the consistency over time. So it's not just making peace with food, it's making peace with our ideals, our associations, our beliefs attached to the standard we've created in our mind about the goal we're trying to achieve.
I see.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really challenging. Like Mandy and I both are coaches, and sometimes we've got clients that we work with and they have this concrete goal and they'll say things like, I know I can do it. Like I can see it. Like I know I can do it. And they have a really hard time with giving up certain things that have food and alcohol kind of attached to them. And sometimes what I'll say is sort of just like, it just should feel like a choice. Like it should feel like you want to choose something different so that you can move in the direction of this big goal. So I think that is something that I find as a coach that's hard to help people with that mindset, because I think for me, I've had the experience of it being wonderful. Like I've had the show day, I've had the people I meet, and like I can just look back on them and go, it's totally worth it. But it's so hard for somebody who's brand new that is just like all they see when you're telling them, okay, well, this is not in line with where you want to be. And they're like, they have no idea of like sort of like the present that they're going to unwrap on show day. So like, what are some things that would be helpful for somebody that is really just like, they don't feel like they can give that up in order to get where they need to get? I mean, obviously you mentioned sort of the macroing it in, but I think some people are even like, no, it's got to be the real thing, or it doesn't feel as good, or I can't say no, I want to enjoy myself. So I think I've jumbled up that question, but sort of like, what is a helpful thing to say in that scenario?
I'm understanding your question, I believe. So there's a couple things that come to mind. So first and foremost is, I love using a what if formation to create a curiosity and creativity. So I would encourage them like, well, what if I did give that up? What if I did make it there and I hadn't engaged with those things? Or what if I did say no to this? Or what if I was someone who was capable of letting this go? When you ask a question like that, what if I was someone who loved my body? What if I was someone who adhered to my plan? Your mind creates images of what that looks like, what that might feel like, what that might be like, versus affirmation, I am adherent, I will be adherent, I'm going to do this, I'm going to say no. And so what if I was a person who did say no? So now you can kind of start to visualize what that looks like and hopefully draw that process of change to the behavior. The second thing I would say is to those people is you don't have to change this all right now. That can be difficult. But if you can make one step where, okay, maybe you're still going out, but you're not also having the alcohol, you're just having the food, that's a good first step. Or you usually drink a bottle of wine with your girlfriend. Let's do 2 glasses, let's see what that could look like if it was done a little bit differently. I think everybody feels like they have to do it right now. So they miss the learning opportunities that come with implementing the changes needed to create that lifestyle. The third thing I would say, and this is really important, is what are those current choices bringing your life, or how are they satisfying you currently, and can it be satisfied in a different way? So let's say someone goes, well, it really makes me feel connected to my social circle. Okay, what else could we do to feel connected with your social circle? Well, maybe we could go for a walk. Well, okay, does that feel as satisfying as going out to eat or drinking with them? No, because I like getting dressed up. I like going out with them. Okay, so what could we do instead? Well, maybe I could ask them if they want to go check out this new place in downtown and we could explore there. Awesome. So by identifying what is actually satisfying in your life, you can present or propose a different solution. Lastly, what will you lose if you give that up? What do you feel you're going to lose? Are you going to lose their approval? Are you going to lose friendships? Are you going to lose love? There's a lot of romantic partners who are worried that they're going to lose the connection to their spouse because they're like, well, now we're not doing these date nights, and now I have to not accept the cookie that they brought home from work, and now I have. So that's where, okay, you're actually giving other things up too. And so are you prepared to do that? And if not, what needs to happen to make you feel prepared? Maybe it's new communication strategies. Maybe it's new coping strategies. Maybe it's involving them in your lifestyle in some way and making it very clear to them why this is important to you from a values perspective. Not I want to look good on stage and get these photo shoots done. No, from a values perspective, why does this matter to you? Enroll them into that vision, so that you not just are supporting yourself and feeling isolated in that journey, but you have that community. I feel like I ran a lot, you guys, because I get so passionate about this.
So
No,
good.
I hope
it's
not too much.
Yeah, you touched on like a little bit of everything. Like Jillian said a little bit ago, like we have clients that struggle with, I honestly think, a little bit of everything that you said. Like, right, like creating that image, creating the what if scenario, creating the thought process of like, well, what if you did achieve like your goal? And I know I have that for many of my clients. My thing that I always like to tell my clients, tell anybody, I'm like, food is so accessible now. Like, food is never going anywhere. It's always going to be there. You can literally sitting right here, like this whole podcast, I could DoorDash a cookie with my name on it, and I bet it'd be here before like the podcast ends. And I'm like,
that'd be a fun experiment.
Yeah.
I should do that one time. But it's just so, and I bet it would though, because DoorDash is crazy around here. But just to know, like, putting yourself ahead of those like instant gratifications, those aren't gonna like help you towards anything, and that they're always gonna be there, and just thinking to yourself like, what will happen when you do that, when you get to that goal? What will you feel like will you sleep better? Will you have, better circulation, like better, well, how will your cholesterol be? Like it goes even outside like the stage of like your health and well-being, especially as like you get older. Like that's such a huge thing, especially with our clients, hormonal health and everything. It's like you can look amazing on stage, and that's the goal, and that's where we're going to get you, but look at all these milestones that are going to happen, and what would that feel like to finally see that and to create that for them? So I loved that was perfect.
Oh, good. Yeah, actually, I think hearing you say that too, it got me thinking about like the reflex too of like what we were used to doing, like used to placing the order on DoorDash, used to saying yes to, like you get into this reflex mode of like, well, it's a habit to do those other things. So I love when you said the instant gratification, and it reminded me sometimes practicing delayed gratification in more comfortable, controlled settings can equip you to be better in those settings that you don't feel like you have as much control, like food or body checking, for example. So by practicing it with, okay, I am not going to watch this Netflix show until the dishes are done. That's a great way to practice it in a controlled environment and around something that doesn't maybe carry as much reward or reinforcement as food, for example, or happy feelings.
I went through that myself, actually. I literally did that like I think it's almost been a month now, but I had to cut almost all caffeine. I had to cut back like a dramatic amount of caffeine. I had to come to 1 cup instead of a pot.
I didn't realize you were drinking a pot a day. I would have said something, but I did not realize it was a pot of coffee a day.
Because I will be so real on this episode. I would drink a pot of coffee a day. I don't drink energy drinks, but pre-workouts. And then I would drink, maybe like a latte or something, all caffeinated.
Yeah.
And I never had a problem. In fact, my doctor, I went and saw a doctor a couple months ago, and they're like, hey, you should.
How did they figure that out?
I told him, like, I was honest.
Well, that was good.
Yeah, I'm not going to hide that from him. Like, no, there's a lot of stuff I needed to talk to this doctor about. So like, she's like, listen, try to just do a cup and like, just try. And I'm like, but to what you said, in a controlled environment, I literally just did 1 K-cup, a pot, a decaf, and just like baby stepped it.
Yeah.
That's but like I did it in a controlled environment. I wasn't around anybody. I didn't talk about it. I just did it for a few days before I started telling people. And then it was just like, it gets back to communication though too. Like you said, you have to communicate with like your friends and family, like your goals, because they're going to bring you lattes and espressos and Americanos because they know that's what you've been drinking for several years, right? Yeah. Where it's like you have to communicate with them and be like, hey, I have this new goal or this new like thing I'm doing. Can you please respect it? So, yeah.
Yep. And when they disrespect it, highlighting that. And when they do respect it, highlighting that. Like, okay, it makes me feel disrespected when I've told you about my goals to reduce caffeine intake and you've brought me these lattes every day. It makes it difficult for me. How can I help you to continue to satisfy your desire to give me things without it being this? Or, wow, I know you used to bring me or buy me coffee gift cards all the time as a gift. It means so much to me that this time you went with the running shoes. I don't know. Like, cause that is important to me more than this coffee right now. So I love that example. And Mandy, I'm actually curious, in cutting caffeine, did you notice any, I don't know if you struggle with anxiety or anything, but did you notice any decrease in anxiety or other things like that?
So I wouldn't say anxiety, but I'm already a chill person. Like my personality is pretty relaxed. I will say I'm just more like leveled. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I didn't have anxiety or I wasn't like rushed or like, manic. I just more like, and I never had a problem sleeping. I didn't have a problem with my energy. Like I was I tolerated it so well that I would get a little sleepy in the afternoon, but like, I feel like that's normal. Like I got up at 5 a.m. like to be sleepy at 3 or 4. Like I feel like that's a normal thing. Right. So other than that, it's just, I was very chill. I wasn't as like, I don't know, riled up, I guess.
I got you.
So, yeah.
That'd be a hard one.
Cool.
So, but
good job.
Proved you can do all things, Mandy.
I know. I feel like that's part of all a competitor's personality, trying to say like you can't do something. I'm like, oh no, no, watch me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that sort of segues into my next question because I do think that it is obviously we're all competitors. We know it can be extreme, but I think that can be that all or nothing extreme hardcore mindset, like especially maybe in somebody who's new and they're kind of like, nope, I'm cutting all this and I'm not doing this, and they do it and they are very disciplined. Well, they'll say disciplined, but as a coach from the outside watching in, I'm like, I've got to keep an eye on this person because I know that when the dangling carrot is removed, we're on the other side of this show and we go into like a post show and we don't have, this countdown and whatnot. I'm concerned that maybe this person might, feel like they don't know who they identify as anymore because they went from very loose habits and with some weight to lose, then they went very, very strict and extreme. And you'll hear sometimes competitors sort of reflecting back on like even peak week, like, oh, I wish I could just like do my peak week diet again so I can just get like, 5 pounds off and really tighten up. And then I'm just like, like the red flags are going off in my brain as a mom and as a competitor. So I kind of want to dive into that and that being a cautionary mindset of that all or nothing and maybe what your experience is and how you would help somebody with that.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. So, I kind of am thinking a few different things. When you're doing a check-in with your coach, try to share other things that you're invested in your life and that are exciting you or that you identify with, I think that can help to just always reframe your mentality. Like, it's not just about the sport. It's not just about this prep. This is adding to my life in X, Y, and Z ways outside of this. So taking the time to identify that in check-ins, or if like you are working as a coach, like including that in your check-ins too, like for those people especially, like tell me about how else this discipline shows up in your life. I'm really curious. Or what else is exciting you outside of this prep? Or do you have any plans for after this show? Engaging those types of conversations so they kind of are like thinking about that more frequently. And then the other thing too that I've noticed is when there are a lot of people who are motivated by the dangling carrot, I think this sport is very attractive for those types of people too, because there is a calendar date you're working towards. I actually find it beneficial to not set a show date until you are really close. So removing the timeline can be helpful and also could relieve some of the all or nothing thinking, because sometimes what happens is with that show date, if they're not giving their all, then they're like, well, I've already messed up. So now I'm not going to push, or now I'm not going to do this. And they're not attributing the process to other positives in their life. It's just like, oh, I'm just doing this for the show. So I think if we remove like when the show's going to be, we just know it's going to happen. And then maybe around like, I think usually like 8 to 10 weeks out, it's not a big deal to have that show date maybe picked out or have an idea of like a time frame early on. But that would be my recommendation there. And then lastly, like you said already, have other goals in mind outside of this sport. And every day that you're eating a meal or you're doing a workout, identify, how is this adding to my life outside of the sport? What is this giving to me? So when I'm present with my children, why is that? Oh, well, I have more energy not because of all the caffeine, but because I'm eating well, I'm nourishing my body. Or, oh, wow, I notice at work I'm like feeling more confident in my presentations because I'm taking care of myself. My body hasn't changed, but I'm taking care of myself. So identifying and reinforcing that through the process can help then post-show. You're like, okay, well, even if I don't have a dangling carrot, wow, this has been so amazing, and I really want to maintain these habits.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think having a plan to be prepared, but then also just, kind of looking at more than just the show and more than just the prep. I mean, it is very involved and you have to certainly dedicate yourself, but you want to have something on the other side of it. And so I think that's a really good goal. I've not thought about sort of putting no date on the map, because when you think about it, sometimes people are like, well, I can do anything for 10 more weeks, or I can do anything for, sort of like those short-lived goals. And what we know about the sport is that, I mean, it's all year, different phases of it, but it doesn't just end when the show is over. So I think that's really smart.
I know. I was going to ask you what show you plan on doing. Now I know you probably don't have one picked.
No, I don't. I can give you a timeline. I can say there is a show I have in mind. The date has not yet been announced. There are rumors about a show. I won't say them on here because they could just be rumors.
Yeah.
But there's a show potentially going to happen towards the beginning of next year that is a natural pro qualifier. Once they announce that, that's the main goal, and we will work towards that. But to get qualified, do shows leading up to that, I don't know yet. I had no idea.
Yeah. I love that, though. I think that's more in that long-term sort of thing.
I do like the idea of, like, just not having a show in mind. It's different. Like Jillian just said, like, for the longevity of the sport, like, it is a different way of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, because as Jillian said in the beginning of my journey, too, I was always like, I can definitely do this plan. I only have 3 more weeks, and then... But that's so not the mentality, right? Like, we all know it's not 3 more weeks. It's 3 weeks plus your reverse, plus your improvement season. And that's something else I tell people. If they have never competed before, but they want to, I'm like, okay, so this lifestyle is not just a prep, first and foremost. Like, it's not just going to happen for this 16 weeks or whatever it might be. And it's not a great lifestyle if you're looking to maintain a physique for a long period of time. Especially when you're new in this sport, you're going to get feedback. So let's say you're probably going to be told to grow. Let's be real. You're probably going to be told to grow. So now you need to push to grow. You're not going to just say, hang out there. It's nice, close to show weight. Awesome. I look great. No, because you want to compete again. So now you've got to build, which means you're going to put on some weight. Your body's going to change. And then guess what? It's going to be time to prep. Now you're going to start cutting. Your body's going to change. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that is how bodybuilding works. And then there are times like you start progressing in your journey and you get more into that. The wave is a little bit lower or shorter. It's not as much of this, and it shouldn't really be much of this, but I mean more so intentionally is what I'm saying. And that's good. And then you might get to a point where you're like, I'm really happy. Like for me right now, I'm like, man, prepping is so weird because I'm so happy with how my improvement season was, my lifestyle was, my body was. I'm like, I don't even know if I care enough, to do this when the stage physique, I don't even like it other than in the photos. But I'm also really excited about the process. I'm excited to see what I've done. But I tell people who are thinking about it, I'm like, if you're doing this to look like that all the time, they don't even look like that all the time, and you certainly won't.
Yeah. I actually remember a couple years ago, Jillian, I don't think I ever told you this, but we met in 2017, Celeste, so I think this had to be shortly after that show that my husband and I sat down, and you kind of start realizing that. I mean, back then we're still, in bikini, still figuring that out, like your rebound, your reverse, you're gaining all the weight back. And so I remember talking to my husband about it because he's like, well, do you want to keep doing this to yourself? Do you want to keep gaining weight, losing weight, cutting, bulking? Back then we used all the terms. And he's like, or do you just want to be like a fit person at the gym? He's like, you can still go to the gym, still be fit. Like, do you still want to do that? And it's funny because I did think about it for a really long time because I have a lot of friends that are fit. Like, they're just fit, regular people. And I'm just like, well, maybe. And I thought about it for a long time. Like, I just won't compete anymore. Like, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I don't want to do this. But if there's something in you, there's that something in you that's just no, I want to do that. I want to get that critique. I want to get that feedback. I want to push myself, the competitive nature, but you do want to question yourself because you do want to remind the new competitors, you're going to look pretty awesome for a little while, but the work you have to put into it. Nowadays you have social media, you can kind of see all the stuff you put into it, but it's not going to stay that way. You're going to go into an off season. And I will say this year, I have loved Jennifer Dory sharing so much of her off season because to be Miss Olympia and to look like how she looks now is great. That's her in her off season. She is not always shredded and veiny with abs, and she's Miss Olympia. Just be aware that whenever you're done with stage, you're going to put weight on, you're going to push this back, you're going to be pushing harder, having more calories, and you're not always going to look like that. Or do you just want to be a fit person? Asking yourself that before you go through everything.
Yes, such a great point. And competing won't make you a fit person year round in general. It's not competing that's going to do that for you. So don't make it about getting on stage as this will be what gets me fit. It should really be I'm getting fit, I'm feeling healthy, I'm living this lifestyle, and now I'd like to compete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. So what would you say are some ways to set yourself up for a successful off season and preparing for the post-show blues? Because a lot of times I talk to girls that have never competed before, and they might have heard a story of somebody who just had a horrible post-show experience and they talked negatively about the sport, or just, sort of just having that caution of being aware that maybe after the show they might experience that. So what are some ways to help prepare yourself as an athlete for the post-show?
Well, the first thing is don't take another person's experience and let that define yours completely. You don't have to struggle. You might struggle. You might not. You certainly don't have to. It's not like a rite of passage in this sport. You don't have to endure that and suddenly you're really a competitor because you understand the post-show blues. You don't have to go through all that. So that's first of all. And then the second thing is, when it comes to your post-show experience, one of the worst things or biggest problems that I see happen is the athlete still tries to do what they were doing on prep. I think it's important to set new standards and expectations as well as goals for your improvement season. So it's not just, I have to be in prep mode still. It really could take on its own life form where, what habits do I want to continue? Maybe you really liked getting up in the morning to do cardio, so that could continue, but does it need to be as intense? No. Does it need to be as long? Probably not, but that'll happen as your coach changes things. So have habits and things that you want to continue, but set new standards. Well, do I want to be going out to eat? Do I want to be doing some new things and new experiences and not have to worry about this? I think that's really important. I wouldn't plan something like a vacation the day after your show or anything that lasts for a week plus. I wouldn't recommend it. So we still want to set our environment up for success. We do have to recognize our environment will play a role in our behaviors. So that is important to consider, like what's going to be the best environment for me to have a successful reverse. And then not put too much pressure on yourself. Expect things to change. And I say you have to and you can accept what you can expect. So you can expect your body's going to start looking different. You can expect, and that could be leaner or less lean. I mean, sometimes post-show, you're like still fired up and getting leaner. So expect your body will change. Your food's going to change. Your maybe hunger levels, desire for things, motivation, those things will change. But when you expect it, you can accept it. The problem is a lot of people have so much overconfidence in their future self that they don't take the time to identify potential sabotages that could come up. So break down for yourself. Oh, I've been thinking a lot about desserts. That's a potential sabotage that could come up. So let me write that down, and here's how I'm going to overcome it. Oh, I've been following all these foodie accounts. I need to overcome that. Or it's possible that my friends, my loved ones, my coworkers will want to celebrate this in certain ways, so I need to address that. Rather than having so much confidence, like, I'm going to be fine post-show, nothing bad's going to happen to me because I'm this amazing. No, like, okay, let's say that's true, but also what if these other things could happen? And I'm not saying let's create every anxious worst-case scenario possible and make ourselves crazy, but let's be considerate of what are your potential risks and how could you overcome them? Because as an athlete, you don't want to set yourself up for failure by not even identifying that failure is possible, especially when you have high expectations of yourself. A failure could be the weight going up. A failure could be not executing on your plan the way you thought you would. A failure could be being extra exhausted and taking an extra rest day that first Monday after your show. So set expectations, talk about that with your coach, and then everything else that I said, I would say make that a priority to implement.
Yeah,
Like
I think
being
that's
prepared.
so important.
Yeah, I think that's really smart advice. I mean, it'd be great if it didn't happen to everybody, but we always talk about sort of the science of what's going on and, you know, just even just going through the experience and, you know, the highs and the lows, which, I mean, the highs are so high, you know, it is just such a fun thing. It can be difficult to deal with feedback too, you know, like separating. We had a guest early on in our podcast that talked about that like the most helpful thing for her was like separating emotion from feedback because it is your body.
Talked about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're putting your body on stage and you have to, you cannot take that personal. You've given them a job to do. They are judging you. You ask them to do that. And that can be really tough for people in this sport. And so I think just, you know, awareness of sort of like that is going to happen. You are going to be in front of a room of strangers. They are just going to give you a score. And that's sort of how it works. But I think that can be really tough for people too, because we are so, as women and men, of course, too, but like, you know, we're hard on ourselves. And then to put yourself into the ring and ask for someone to essentially pick you apart, right? So I think that can be really tough too. Do you think that plays into, you know, your relationship with food because of sort of that feeling of your body and now you have things you already thought about yourself and then judging feedback that you need to, you know, use strategically and use it in a positive way. But I think that can be hard. Do you think that plays into that sort of emotional experience post-show?
Absolutely. And body image dissatisfaction is one of the number one predictors for falling into eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors for elite female athletes. So when you consider that as bodybuilders, it's in the name, body image, bodybuilders. I mean, it's part of it. And when you are getting that type of feedback, if you internalize it and you make it, yes, too emotional, I think it can absolutely influence that. This is the test that I like to give competitors. I'm like, okay, like, where do your eyes first go when you look in the mirror? Most people who are bikini competitors tell me their waist, and then their shoulders and their glutes. Like, it's everything they get judged on. Yeah. And I'm like, so we have to acknowledge it impacts our body image to compete in this sport, even if we separate emotionally, because why? We're driven to it every single day. That's what we're trying to do. And then we get the feedback, and every day we're like, well, I got to do these vacuums because of this, or I got to do this shoulder workout because of that. So it's a dominating thought in our mind. So absolutely, I think it influences our behaviors because it has to. Mm-hmm. It's when does it influence them positively versus when does it influence them negatively. So if we can keep it on the positive stream of things, like, well, it's influencing me to keep showing up at the gym, to keep executing on my plan, to keep focused on knowing that this is actually criteria that I like and love and want to be judged against, that can, I think, help mitigate it, along with reducing body checking, reducing judgmental statements about your body, and instead focusing on, I'm executing, I'm confident in my execution, I'm confident in my plan. That's most important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's interesting that body image dissatisfaction is a precursor to eating disorders, because I think body image dissatisfaction is a precursor to wanting to do bodybuilding because of sort of like, I don't like my stomach. Oh, there's this beautiful athlete in the sparkly bikini with the abs I want. So I think that is, I mean, I don't think the three of us, we probably can all say that at some point, like, we thought, oh, I'd like to look like that. And was part of the draw to the sport. So I think that it's just realizing it and going, okay, like, this is probably what drew you to this. You probably have some of these traits anyways. So just having some skills and some strategies, because again, kind of going back to, like, you can be successful in this sport, have a long career in this sport, and overcome, certain things that maybe others think you can't do both of those things. So I think that's empowering.
Yes, true.
Yeah. I know what drew me to the sport was not just the looks, of course, because once I saw I originally saw a figure competitor when bikini was first coming out, but I was like, oh, like, how do you do that? And then to find out that it's all the work that you put in as your own self, nobody can buy it for you, give it to you, it has to be your own work. That always attracted me. But what's fascinating is when I started this sport, I never thought about an eating disorder, mental health. That never entered my brain. I did the whole rebound, post-show blues. I did that several times, and it wasn't until 2022. Yeah, 2022, where I started noticing these things about myself personally that I couldn't figure out. Like, I was done competing. I was happy. I was, like, in my improvement season, but I couldn't stop snacking. And I had never, ever had this problem before. My son was older even, so I didn't have the kiddo snacks. And I just couldn't stop snacking on extra stuff and overeating. And I had a coach that I couldn't communicate that well with. So I just was like, is something wrong with me? What's going on? And I would, I don't know the term for it, but I would hold all my calories. So, like, I would basically not eat all day. And I'll be like, no, I'm just not that hungry. I'm going to save my calories. And then I would binge eat. And then I'd be like, oh, well, I just failed. And I don't want to say I developed an eating problem. It just was more of like, something's going on and I have to figure it out. And of course I thought about you and all the work that you do. So I used your free workbook to help kind of get me through that personal, like, time in my life to figure out, like, how to fix that. So I would love for you to share about all the free work that you help with everybody, like, through not just your podcast, but your workbook that you offer for people too.
Yeah, I love that you did that. And yeah, I'm so glad that you did. So the free workbook is the free 8-day food relationship coaching series. So what you get is a series of videos delivered to your email inbox, along with a full PDF that will guide you through each video, giving you very specific action steps, tools, and resources you can apply through that process and beyond. And at the end, there's a full workshop as well. And then I have a free post-show blues coaching series. If you're not struggling with food so much, I would recommend that one if it's more like goals related. If you're struggling with food, guarantee you're going to get through day 1 or day 2 of the post-show blue series. I'm going to read your email because I'm always happy to give feedback as part of the free coaching series. I want you to send me your work. I'll give you feedback. I'll see that you're struggling with food, and I'll say, you should be doing the free food relationship series. So I'm clarifying that now. And then I have a free competitor card deck. So the competitor card deck is great for anyone in any season, but like, let's say you're wanting to tap into like more of your identity, kind of dig into like what's the purpose behind what you're doing. It'll give you affirmations, it'll give you belief statements, and it'll give you journal prompts, and then and behaviors that you can implement. So like action and belief stuff. And then I have a free workshop on mindless snacking. And I'm probably forgetting of the stuff that I offer for free. I try to make a lot of great resources for people. So I would say those ones, the most popular is the free food relationship coaching series. And I think that all of them are great resources no matter where you're at in the journey. But you can get all of that at celestial.fit, www.celestial.fit.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's so great. We've had so many clients use those resources because it's really common. And I think when somebody's struggling, they really do feel like a failure, and they've gone through, a prep, and they've done so well. And then now they're like sort of, I would say acting out and having some issues controlling their food. So, I mean, we talk a lot about the physical, the chemical things that are going on in the body as things are adjusting and getting back to homeostasis. But I see emotional eating like in the other side of our company with our lifestyle clients as well. And it can be really hard for people to understand. Like a lot of times they're really focused on it being about the food. It's the food, it's this, and maybe I just need to be doing this differently. But there's always reasons. A lot of times people have done it for a long time, and that is the reason why they're coming to us for weight loss. So when it comes to emotional eating, there is this sort of like, it's a lack of willpower, which I always tell people that is not the case at all. So help our listeners kind of understand a little bit more about what's kind of going on for people that you see that are dealing with emotional eating, and some strategies that they can incorporate and resources maybe that they can even turn to.
For sure. So first of all, I love that you tell your clients it's not about discipline in those situations. That drives me crazy. Like when I hear that coaches tell their clients, like, you just need more discipline, you just need more willpower. I'm like, they literally went through a whole prep and they were just fine. And you think that this person has a discipline problem? I don't think so. There's something else happening here. So I'm really grateful you said that, because that's important. As far as emotional eating goes, we think about emotional eating only from the perspective of negative emotions. It can also be positive ones too. So it's important to know, like, even if you have the desire to eat because you're elevated mood, you're happy, maybe you're celebrating, that's fairly normal as well. So don't dismiss it just because it's not negative. It's still worth looking into. Why do we always need to go to food? But let's say it's any emotion. So I would recommend you outline what emotions generally trigger the desire to eat. If you can't do that, then look at what emotions am I getting when I am eating? Because maybe you don't have the ability yet to label, identify, or name the emotions you're experiencing. So by saying, okay, every time I'm doing this, what is the emotion I'm experiencing? Maybe one day it's relief. Maybe one day it's escape. Maybe one day it's happiness. Maybe one day it's peace. So let's say those are all the things you identified you actually get from the food. Well, now we can say, well, then I'm probably feeling stressed, I'm probably feeling sad, or I'm probably feeling anxious or overwhelmed. Now we can see, oh yeah, these triggers make sense. And then what I would encourage is look at that list of what you're trying to get. So the mood you're feeling, then the mood you're craving. So maybe you're feeling anxious, you're craving relief. So then what else can you do to create the emotion of relief, or the feeling of relief? So in the moment, you can take yourself through that process and go, oh, here's what I could do. What you can also do is say, on a consistent basis, I need to plan for things that bring me relief. I need to put this in my calendar, I need to put it in my schedule, it needs to be in my planner, it needs to be part of my life, that I'm taking care of myself and bringing myself relief. If you notice emotional eating is happening at a specific time of day, each day, I highly recommend that you create an interruption, or a pattern interruption, or behavior interruption at that time. So let's say every time you get home from work, you're like, I'm a snack monster. Okay. And And maybe you just want relief or to escape.
Yeah.
So before you leave for work, put a something silly, maybe it could be, or a sign on your door, or something that just interrupts it. Maybe it's even slippers by the door. So let's say you put slippers by the door on your way out of work. So then when you pull up at home and you're walking through that door and you see the slippers, you're like, oh yes, this is my sign to relax, get into relax mode. So you take off your work shoes, you put on your slippers, you walk into the bedroom, and then you change into pajamas, or you take a shower, change, and then you go and engage in what you need to. So we are satisfying that need instead of going straight to the food to do it quickly. We're satisfying it in a different way, and we're interrupting that pattern. And lastly, give yourself grace and compassion. I like to participate in self-validation. So that is, you can use the process of AAU. So you would acknowledge the emotion that you're experiencing, allow yourself to experience it. Food is a way to avoid it, or other unhealthy coping mechanisms is a way to avoid it. And then you, meaning understand. Take the time to understand that emotion. What triggered it? What causes that? Where is that coming from? So AAU, self-validate, so that way you can better gauge your emotional needs and support yourself. That gives us insight into proper coping skills or techniques that we can use, or maybe even changes to the environment, behaviors, relationships that would be beneficial.
I feel like that's so helpful, especially especially after work or in the evening when you're like relaxing, when you're supposed to be relaxing and scheduling like that relax time, instead of like, oh, I need to eat this or I need to do this. Like with food, it's like, no, find something else to kind of gear your brain to something else. Rather it's reading a book, spending time going on a walk, something else, like something to just trigger that to start being a different type of habit. So I think that's really important.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because I've worked with clients before that were struggling and they were like, I'm happy. Like, no one is abusing me. Like, my life is good. Like, I don't know why I'm struggling with emotional eating, but that makes sense as sort of just excitement or, being happy or, those are reasons. Everybody has their own. It's so personal, and I think that's why it's hard for people to open up, but they're just like, no, I'm just going to stop and everything's going to be fine and I'm just never going to do this again. And it doesn't fix anything. And I don't think competing and doing something really strict is just sort of like prolonging the healing. So I feel like you've given us so many ways that you can really work on that piece of things and set yourself up for a good prep and then like a good post show as well. So you can compete for 107 years like me and be in the sport for a long time for years to come.
Or you get to that point where you're like, wait a minute, I want to keep doing this.
There's going to be a time, Jillian, when you're coaching and you're like, you're going to be like, I started in magazines. And then someone will be like, what's that? Like, I'm just waiting. Like, I'm waiting for that, like, generation.
Oh my gosh. I know. Yeah. It happens all the time though. I mean, I get really young girls that are brand new and they're just like, who's Janet Leung? I'm like, what? Teach a history class. No, I'm being sorry. So,
my first show I think was actually put on a DVD.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they saved it to a CD or a DVD that I could you could buy the CD package. I don't know. Oh. Yeah.
That's really cool. I remember all of the photos were just on my boyfriend's camera, like an actual camera, not a phone, like a camera. And I went to the Walgreens and printed them out and put them in a photo album. And then I sent some of them to sponsors. I'm a fitness competitor. I just did my first show. I love some free protein bars. Nobody wrote to me, but back in the day,
you tried though.
There was no I think it was MySpace, but companies weren't looking for athletes on MySpace years ago. Anyways,
yeah.
Sorry.
I still have, I ran across my old photos of 2016 in my first show and the good old stallion pose, that front pose where you stick your leg out. I had a posing client the other day and she's new and she had no idea what that was. And so I tried to redo it and I'm like, no, where you stick your front leg out and that. Yeah, no.
Do you know that I've been wanting to talk about this on a podcast. Do you know there used to be a pose called the scissor pose?
Oh, wait. Don't tell me this is this the one from the back?
The back. No, this is the back. That's the back pose.
Yeah.
It was maybe 1 year.
I actually saw.
I don't think it lasted.
No, but No, I saw it on stage. So Celeste, I think you know that I expedite shows over kind of all around the Midwest. So like I've seen it. Like I've seen people still do that.
Well, you know why that is? This
Why?
is my assumption as to why that is. If you look up NPC posing on YouTube, the first video that comes up is one that's like most watched, and it's with Sandy Williamson and another athlete, and they demo that back pose. So if someone's new, I could imagine they just type NPC posing, bikini, and they get that.
I did not know that because I always go to nbcnewsonline.com.
Yeah, see, that's the smart thing to do. But
Well,
when I was a first-time competitor, I was like, I got the NPC News magazine. You know what I still have? I'm going to show you. Look at this. This is from the NPC News magazine. This is a printout I got
Oh,
because this is me manifesting becoming an IFBB pro, and so I cut out this little. I was in class D at the time. Who knows what class I'd be in? But I was like, this is gonna be me one day. But look at it, it's covered in tape because I've saved this for years.
Yeah.
Oh my
Bring
God, I love
back
it.
the magazines. That's what I'm saying.
The magazine
that would
was
be fun.
great. It was awesome.
I would
have
love
some.
to get one in the mail. Well, like a new one, like to
Yeah.
recap the month. I think that'd be so fun.
It was
I
so
would,
fun.
I would totally keep a stack on my coffee table.
They
of
would
that.
come so
I
late
used to
though.
look at it every
Like
day.
you would get them like a year after the competition. And like
See,
if
that-
you didn't have a membership, then you
That's
didn't get a
true.
magazine. And I was like, well, I gotta get a membership because I competed last year and I might be in it. But then the magazine like didn't, and then they just went away. But that was like how you got like show results and could see it. I'm sure I have one from 2009 like over there, and I'm sure the scissor pose is in it. And okay, so if you're listening and you don't know what we're talking about and can't see us, it's a back pose, but your feet are like crossed at the ankles, and so your feet are not apart. You're just like,
It makes your butt almost like a heart shape from the back.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah. And it takes away the X shape and it makes more of like a
Like a
Ice cream
bubble,
cone.
like a bubble.
Yeah.
Without,
a lollipop.
scissor pose. I don't think that everyone.
I didn't know it
called
was called that though.
I didn't know that
probably
either,
did.
but why did we both know exactly what she was talking
Because
about?
I'm picturing like something crossing, and I'm like, oh wait, the legs cross.
Exactly. That's what I thought too. I was like, it has to be this.
Yeah.
So many developments for everyone who's listening. And the
Many,
best development is having you, Celeste, because
Yes.
you have so many amazing resources from, the podcast with women sharing their experiences and just even talking about this stuff because, I think sometimes women when they get started can go, okay, I have a coach and everything that this coach tells me is the way, but it's okay to like, you're not like deceiving your coach to like seek other resources and have like, a village of people that help you. Like most pros that you talk to, like that I talk to, they have like, they've got somebody for training, they have somebody for diet, they have somebody for massage and body work, and then they have somebody for core and somebody for mental health. Like if they take this far, you need to just have like a lot of resources. So I'm so grateful to you. I'm so grateful that we've got all of the resources that you share with people. And so just personally, thank you so much for everything that you do because it's a huge benefit for our industry.
Thank you
It's-
both.
Yeah, it shows everybody that they're not alone. I feel like that's like the most important because some of these women they feel so alone. Even no matter how many times we tell them, we're like, no, like people go through this, like it happens. It's common. It's something that can be helped. It's like they're still so no, and it's like to be able to have an avenue to show them, to go to your page, to go see all the things. It's like, oh, like I'm like it's okay. Like you can get help. So yeah, no, thank you for all your work.
Thank you. I appreciate that, you guys. Your support means so much.
Yeah, it's been awesome having you on. And of course, anybody who's listening, if you've got any questions for Celeste, you can comment below. You can message all of us. We will post all of Celeste's information. Her website is celestial.fit. It's so easy to remember. I just like recite it. And also, we can find you on
That's
Instagram at, what's your Instagram handle for those listening?
Actually, it's celestial_fit.
Perfect.
So instead of dot, it's underscore.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's been awesome having you today, Celeste, and I've just loved chatting with you these last couple weeks, and thank you for being our guest today.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.